Every time. Every single time this happens. I am currently neck deep in continuing my history of Soviet aviation. The script is almost finished. Video footage has been sourced. I have over 100 books in various formats throughout my house. And once again, on the cusp of actually making progress, Ukraine does something incredible and derails the entire thing. They've been doing it for years now, and it's actually starting to get a little bit annoying. And yet, given what they did, I can officially declare this a tie-in episode, because a decent number of the last surviving aircraft from the once mighty Soviet strategic bomber force has just met a rather fiery demise at the hands of humanity's newest aerial weapon system, the FPV drone. And how they did it was truly incredible. So grab a drink and strap yourself in, because it's time for us to talk about the great Ukrainian bear hunt. But first, a word about a charity drive. A quite literal charity drive. Let's be honest, guys. The situation at the front line in Ukraine is rather tenuous, and it has been for a while now, which is why we are making a grand push across multiple channels, including my friend History of Everything and now myself, to raise money for trucks to supply the front line. Please click the link in the description to donate to this effort. Donate what you can. Every cent helps. So click the link, donate to the Cars for Ukraine initiative, and hopefully we can achieve our goals. Anyway, back to the video. On May 31st, or June the 1st, 2025, depending on which side of the international dateline you reside, the Ukrainian intelligence service, known as the SBU, carried out one of the most devastating covert operations in modern military history. Over the past 3 years of the war in Ukraine, the biggest strategic threat to the Ukrainian ability to maintain their defense, aside from the front line and its operational demands, has been the ability of the Russian armed forces to carry out interdiction and deep strike operations in the Ukrainian interior via the employment of theater ballistic missiles, long-range loitering munitions, standoff glide munitions, and air-launched cruise missiles. These weapon systems have been able to target everything from frontline strongpoints to energy infrastructure, military industry, communications hubs, and the rail network, posing significant logistical challenges for the armed forces of Ukraine, while inflicting severe loss of life both civilian and military. To counteract this threat, the measures adopted thus far, for the most part, have been defensive in nature, with a heavy focus on modernizing and expanding the Ukrainian integrated air defense system. The introduction of the IRST and Patriot missile systems, alongside the F-16 multi-role fighter, has seen exceptional results in dealing with drones, glide munitions, and cruise missiles. However, due to the recent instability of American support after the election of the Trump administration, combined with delays in European rearmament, the sustainment of these systems is tenuous, and should that supply chain be interrupted or even severed, the ability of Ukraine to defend against another concerted strategic bombing campaign would be significantly degraded, and pose an even greater demand on the already stretched Ukrainian logistics network. This calculus has been well known to strategic planners on both sides of the conflict for some time. Russian aerospace forces operations have had a heavy focus on deep strike operations over the past year, using cruise missiles and glide bombs at a considerable rate. American intelligence assets working with Ukraine have been providing vital real-time raid warning by observing Russian long-range aviation assets launching strike packages from their air bases, and these warnings have been an almost daily occurrence, weather permitting. Not a day goes by in major Ukrainian cities without a text alert going out saying Russian bombers are airborne, followed an hour later by air raid sirens. As such, the expenditure of munitions to intercept these threats is profligate and expensive, with hundreds of interceptor missiles and thousands of rounds of ammunition being fired each week to defend against these strikes. With the mounting issues of sustaining this rate of consumption, Ukraine has consistently lobbied for their own theater ballistic missiles and air-launched cruise missiles to be provided by NATO in order to take proactive measures against these threats under the PR campaign titled "Stop Blocking Arrows, Kill the Archer." However, fears over nuclear escalation with Moscow, and, quite frankly, blatant cowardice, left Western leaders unwilling to authorize strikes on Russian air bases with advanced munitions inside Russian sovereign territory, while the United States blocked the provision or sale of any long-range munitions past the initial provisions of ATACMS and GMLRS under the Biden administration. Which is exceptionally frustrating, given that there are systems that the F-16 could readily employ, such as the JASSM-ER or the JSOW, that could provide the Ukrainians with an equivalent standoff capability to the Russian aerospace forces. And the requests for those systems have been consistently denied, leaving the Ukrainians with the sole option of developing an indigenous capability to respond. This capability has taken the form of their own prototype theater ballistic missile, which has yet to see service as far as we know, while an extensive long-range drone campaign has been waged against Russian air bases and energy infrastructure, most famously with the intercontinental ballistic Cessna. God, I love that thing. However, as cool as it is, this, however, has its limitations. Due to the technology used in long-range UCAVs, as well as the presence of electronic warfare systems and an integrated air defense network, the accuracy and lethality of these strikes are severely limited. As we saw in the strikes on Russian airfields last year, munition dumps, fuel tanks, oil refineries, and forward operating bases are one thing. Those targets are big, and more importantly, they don't move. But precision strikes against point targets and parked aircraft are another thing entirely. And given that Russia knows that their air-launched cruise missile capability will be one of Ukraine's primary targets, these aircraft are based well inside the Russian interior in heavily defended installations, rendering them practically immune to conventional attack. Thus, 18 months ago, under an initiative rumored to have been spearheaded by President Zelensky himself, the Ukrainian Intelligence Service, the SBU, began drawing up a plan to strike at the heart of Russian long-range aviation, those being the bombers of the 22nd Guards Heavy Aviation Division and the 326th Heavy Bomber Division, equipped with the Tu-95MS, the Tu-22M3, and the Tu-160 Blackjack, supported by the A-50 mainstay AWACS and assorted heavy-lift transport aircraft. The plan to destroy them bore the codename Spider's Web. The operational concept for this mission was rather simple. Smuggle several large strike packages comprised of FPV drones into secure locations near Russian strategic bomber bases. Once the drones have reached their respective launch points, mission start is coordinated to a set Zulu time and then initiated en masse. The subsequent drone swarm launches a simultaneous attack across the entire force with little to no warning, wiping out a considerable number of Russia's long-range aviation assets at a minimal cost with practically zero risk to Ukrainian personnel. The million-dollar question about this plan, though, was how. And if you've played Ace Combat 7, you will be feeling a distinct sense of déjà vu followed by an incredible attack of PTSD, especially if you play against those drones on Ace difficulty. Yet I guarantee it's not as bad a PTSD experience as the commander of the VKS is having right now. In fact, the head of the FSB is probably feeling pretty nervous as well. There is likely going to be a lot of tragic accidents happening in Moscow very shortly after this affair. Anyway, the answer is shipping containers, or connexes for those in the military sphere. Russia, like every large country such as Australia, the US or China, runs on the back of its truck drivers. In every town, every city, every railway hub, there is a truck park near endless rows of warehouses, shipping everything and anything across the vast Eurasian steppe that can't be reached by rail. Therefore, if you can manage to smuggle enough drones required for the mission into Russia while retaining operational security, all you need to do is work out the method for remote command and control while developing a system to deploy the strike packages effectively. Then all you have to do is ship them on a flatbed to the launch point and commence the operation once everyone is in place. Which then leads us to what is now the logical conclusion. Why not convert a bunch of universal standard shipping containers into drone carriers? Rig up a simple sliding launch door into the roof of the container while mounting the drones in a configuration similar to that of a missile launch magazine, and then they can simply deploy directly from the transports. No one is going to question a random trucker just driving along the highway. Especially when you consider these bases are over 1,000 miles away from the Ukrainian border, and even if the Russians were on high alert, unless they knew exactly what they are looking for, they'd never suspect the truckers of all people. Because with Russia's economy as it is, and the priority that freight trucks and trains get during a time of war, they would be very unlikely to be searched. Which then leads us to the next problem: command and control. The exact internal design of the drones used is unknown for obvious reasons, and some people have speculated that due to the electronic warfare defenses in place around Russian air bases, that this mission would require fiber optic command cable drones. However, from the photos we have, this doesn't seem to be the case, at least in terms of guidance from the launch point. So how did the Ukrainians coordinate the strike without getting jammed or stopped? Well, they piggybacked off the Russian government cell network. Every single drone operator carrying out the strike was safe and sound inside Ukraine using the Russians' own communications network to do it. Brilliant. Pure brilliance. Not to mention, absolutely hilarious. And to add insult to injury, the safe house for the Ukrainian intelligence operatives in Russia who were planning, organizing, and laying the groundwork for this operation, including hacking into the comms network and arranging for the shipping containers, was right next to a regional FSB headquarters. There's hiding in plain sight, and then there's that. Absolute chads. That is a level of trolling I aspire to. But maybe the best part of it all is the final phase of the staging process. Because according to Zelensky and the SBU, every Ukrainian involved in the operation was already back home in Ukraine and perfectly safe by the time the mission started. Which wouldn't have been possible if not for the simple fact that the people who deployed the drones at their launch sites weren't Ukrainian agents. Oh no. The SBU inserted these containers into standard truck parks near their assigned targets and then contracted regular Russian truckers to ferry them to their launch points. Da, Volodya, just drive it to this place here. It is planned building site for a new Lenta supermarket. We are just laying the groundwork. Just drop it there, it'll be fine. Then, when they get there, no worries, Sasha, thanks for that. Just drop it off. We've got a few guys coming around in about an hour or so to set it up. We've already sent the invoice through to you, and we sent a copy to your boss, okay? Everything good? Da, great. See you later. This entire mission, from a covert operations perspective, is near perfect. It is completely hands-off. Even the agents in place aren't involved in the execution phase. They're back home in Kyiv calling through WhatsApp. The operational security on this is incredible. They planned this for 18 months. 18 months, and carried all of this out using Russian proxies, and they did not get caught. And thus, around mid-morning local time on June 1st, 2025, with the strike packages safely in place, Operation Spider's Web commenced. 116 FPV drones began launching from their containers, targeted at the following VKS installations: Olenya Air Base, located near Murmansk in northern Russia; Belia Air Base, near the city of Irkutsk; Ukrainka Air Base in the Amur region on the border with China; Ivanovo Air Base, near the city of the same name, located in western Russia; and Diaghilevo Air Base, located near the city of Ryazan. I apologize to any Eastern Europeans for my pronunciation. Once airborne, the uplink with the pilots in Ukraine was established. With this done, they flew on autopilot towards their designated GPS coordinates, at which point they began selecting targets. What's really cool about this is, Ukraine has been experimenting with using AI to augment guidance and targeting for their drones, and over the past 18 months, they have been training their targeting AI at the Poltava Museum for Soviet Long-Range and Strategic Aviation to accurately identify and engage Russian bombers. So even if the connection to the operator was lost, they could automatically destroy their targets should it become necessary. The drones would hunt down and target aircraft themselves. Thus, the drones immediately began homing in on aircraft it recognized, while the operators waited for the optimal release parameters. As seen in this footage, you can see a drone pilot finalizing the attack profile by aiming for the fuel tank in the wing route. However, these bases were and are all well defended, and so a considerable number of the drones were shot down during their ingress into the target area, while the truck assigned to the Ukrainka attack reportedly exploded after only a few of their drones had launched. Even so, the damage they inflicted was considerable. Ukraine reports at least 40 confirmed hits on various aircraft, while confirmed losses at the time of writing sit at between 15 to 20 depending on sourcing, yet some go as high as 30 to 40. And considering that this operation involved no personnel being placed in direct danger, while expending $500 munitions in exchange for a sizable number of irreplaceable multi-million-dollar aircraft, without which Russia loses the ability to carry out its one method of aerial attack that the Ukrainians can't effectively counter. To say that this mission was a wild success is an understatement. In fact, it is quite possibly the most revolutionary and poignant covert operation in modern military history. If the higher estimates are correct, and that is a big if, but there is footage to back it up, 30% of Russia's strategic bomber fleet has been eliminated or mission killed via serious damage. However, as I said, that may be optimistic, as all battle damage assessments of high-profile missions usually are. What follows is the visually confirmed losses via satellite imagery. 10 Tu-95 Bears, 4 Tu-22M backfires, 2 A-50 mainstay AWACS aircraft, though we assume one of them is actually a mothballed spares aircraft, and 1 AN-12 medium transport. However, that is just confirmed damage visible on ISR assets. We have extra footage released by the SBU showing confirmed hits on several more, 35 in total, all of which would have caused significant damage. There is also potential shock damage and shrapnel damage from near misses and secondary detonations that could raise that tally higher in the coming days. This is serious. The impact on Russian operational readiness will be exceedingly significant. There are only around 50 Tu-95s still in service, which would mean 20% of their fleet is now gone. And those are losses they can't easily replace, even with mothballed airframes, as most of those have been cannibalized for spares to maintain the crippling operational tempo they've been running on since the start of the war. The A-50 loss is especially devastating for the same reason. They only have approximately 6 of these aircraft currently in service. The loss of even one will seriously degrade their current sortie rate and pose ever-increasing stresses on their already strained maintenance and logistics network. And as for the Tu-22s, while they have gotten off lighter in terms of overall losses, this is offset by the fact that they are the second most expensive aircraft Russia has in its arsenal, as well as being a maintenance nightmare. Time between overhauls on the backfires are much higher due to their Kuznetsov K-25 jet engines and their variable geometry wings, both of which require regular and very expensive upkeep. So the loss of even one airframe will have a devastating impact on their overall readiness rates. And the damage we've seen to the Tu-22 fleet from the videos we've got, that is serious. That is a big deal. And that's not even factoring in the financial impact of this mission. Estimates place the total dollar value of Russia's equipment losses to this operation at in excess of $7 billion. Which, when you consider that the total cost of the drones at an average cost of $500 each is around $60,000, add in labor, materials, the cost of the containers, storage sites, truck rental, plus the logistics, and of course, time for planning, call it an even $2 million for the whole operation start to finish. Think about that return on investment. And after doing all of that, after achieving all of this, the containers were fitted with demo charges so they can self-destruct, removing any remaining evidence of how they did it, which apparently punched the ticket, as it were, of several Russian security personnel who tried to investigate. So, after taking all of that information in, what does this mean for Russia's ability to prosecute their war against Ukraine? Well, for starters, their ability to consistently strike targets with air-launched cruise missiles is significantly reduced. I wouldn't go so far as to say decisively reduced, but very heavily reduced. These aircraft, as mentioned, are irreplaceable, and their maintenance cycle is already horrible as it is. Losing 20% of their Tu-95s and a quarter of their AWACS is devastating to their operational capability, which will most likely lead to a significant reduction in cruise missile strikes that will have to be made up by less effective drone munitions that are easier to intercept, or much rarer, not to mention exceedingly expensive, theater ballistic missiles. Which, as post-production Animarchy here can tell you, is going to be even harder, seeing as the Ukrainians just blew up a fully loaded Iskander along with its munitions trailer and all of its missiles. And though this operation isn't decisive, it relieves considerable amounts of pressure on Ukraine's air defense while simultaneously depriving the enemy of nice things, which, as we know, is the primary objective of any military operation. The AWACS loss is also particularly important, as Russia isn't the only one carrying out a strategic bombing campaign. AWACS systems have a much longer range than ground-based radars because, guess what, they're 20,000 feet up, meaning that the Russian A-50 can be used to locate launch sites for Ukrainian drone units deep inside the country, as well as identifying forward airfields used by Ukrainian fighters. They also data link into the Russian integrated air defense system, allowing them to coordinate the raid response. This makes Ukraine's drone offensive more effective simply by removing the A-50s from the board, which we can see here actually, because the very next day, the Ukrainian drone forces launched a mass offensive utilizing a very appropriate formation. I don't know if this screenshot is genuine or not. I'd like to think it is, but the sentiment is most definitely accurate. Yet the real impact of this operation is not the actual mission itself, like a lot of things with intelligence operations actually. Even with how effective it was, the real problem is its security implications. Speaking as an Australian, I know firsthand just how dependent my country is on road and rail freight using these containers. And Russia, unlike Australia or the United States, is primarily reliant on overland logistics at the point of importation, given the fact that their access to maritime trade is restricted due to their relatively few major port cities and the fact that those ports very often freeze in winter. The Black Sea could potentially be an option, if not for Turkey controlling the Bosphorus Strait, and Ukraine sinking half their fleet in the region despite not having a navy. In any case, what this means is that instead of the majority of their trade coming through a few tightly controlled trade ports, it comes across a large number of undermanned and under-resourced border crossings, while literally the entire economy runs on intercity supply lines going through thousands of different individual nodes. Do you have any idea what it would take to inspect every single container as a potential threat? Aside from being physically and logistically impossible, even if it wasn't, the amount of time and resources that would take could actually crash the Russian economy, and that isn't hyperbole. But because of that fact, it gets even worse. If you can't secure reliably against this threat, the only thing you can do is establish reactionary defensive measures. So now the Russians will have to stretch their already overtaxed air defense network even further to cover everything, which will make things even worse than they already are by a serious margin. Not that it seems to help very much given this photo. Yes, that is a modern Pantsir S-2 anti-aircraft system right next to a destroyed Tu-95. Come on, dude, you had one job. Literally one job, it's right there! Anyway, or failing that, they will need to remodel every single major strategic bomber base with new taxiways and a full complement of hardened shelters capable of housing large aircraft. Keep in mind that Tu-160 Blackjack, the largest Russian bomber in service, is around 180 feet long, while the Tu-95 has a wingspan of 165 feet wide. The Tu-160 and Tu-22 can retract their wings, so that's not much of an issue for them. The cost of building hardened shelters of sufficient size for all of these aircraft would be excessive, to put it mildly, and it would still take a considerable amount of time. And this fact has caused a serious level of unease among Pentagon and US Air Force officials, because, like the Russians, the United States Air Force keeps most of its strategic bomber fleet parked out in the open on the tarmac rather than in hangars, for the same reason. It's just too expensive. The only aircraft that have their own hangars are the B-2 stealth bombers for obvious reasons. And even then, when they forward deploy like they are currently at Diego Garcia, they are parked on the tarmac with everyone else. Those aircraft cost the equivalent of a small country's GDP, and Ukraine has just proven that you can wipe them all out with one man and a $500 drone with a bag of ANFO strapped to it. This operation has changed the face of strategic aerial warfare as we know it, while going down in history as one of the most legendary covert operations of all time. And as if to put the icing on an already delicious cake, Alex Jones had a meltdown about it on InfoWars.
In that right now, and all the war games lead right towards thermonuclear war and Armageddon. So for all the crazies out there, all the leftists that love evil and love war and everything else, you're getting what you want right now. And I predict we're going to see a massive response from the Russians. And the corporate media will say, look, they're attacking Ukraine for no reason. NATO started the war. They overthrew the governments of Ukraine. They did all of this. They brag about it, for God's sakes. And finally, the Trump administration comes out here.
I just want to fucking stop these people. They gotta be stopped. We gotta stop them.
Anyway, Ukraine pulling an ace combat in real life and wiping out a quarter of Russia's strategic bombers was not on my bingo card for 2025. Post-production Animarchy here, just popping back in to let you know that since I recorded this video, the Ukrainians have actually hacked into Tupolov's servers, and so now they have all the personal emails, addresses, and personnel files of all the engineers who work there, and detailed information on all the projects that Tupolov has going on right now. So even if the Russians want to try and repair and rebuild these aircraft, chances are the equipment and engineers necessary won't be around for very long. Oh, and they also launched a mass drone strike on Engels 2, their largest strategic bomber base, and blew up the fuel depot. So none of them can fly anymore. At least not until they truck more fuel in. And the Ukrainians have shot down an Su-35 as well. This is a second post-production Animarchy. Man, it's not been a good week for the Russian Air Force, has it? But as I was writing this, they also apparently sabotaged several road and rail bridges in the Russo-Ukrainian border regions, while simultaneously attacking the foundations of the infamous Crimean Kerch Bridge with a drone torpedo that looks like a Johnson. An attack we know took place because the Ukrainians can apparently hack the Russian CCTV network at will. For someone who doesn't hold the cards, as President Trump put it, Zelensky seems to have played a straight flush. But that's not what we're here for, is it? Come on now. No. What we're here for are the memes. So without further ado, donate to the charity, let's get the lads a truck. More Soviet Aviation content coming soon. Slava Ukraina. I'll see you next time. Hit that track!